In the chill of January 1944, Admiral Sir Charles Little, the Commander-in-Chief at Portsmouth, gazed out from his office window overlooking Plymouth Harbour. Another American convoy was steaming into the Sound 18 Liberty ships, their grey hulls sitting low in the water under the weight of cargo, decks crammed with crates, vehicles, and equipment secured beneath heavy tarps. Over the past 2 weeks alone, he'd tallied 43 such arrivals. Turning to his logistics officer, he asked for the latest count. "American vessels in port right now, sir. 217 as of this morning," the officer replied, flipping through his clipboard. "And that's not counting the landing craft still under construction or the ones due next week." Little, a veteran of 3 decades in naval operations, had witnessed the might of the Grand Fleet at Scapa Flow and orchestrated the chaos of the Dunkirk evacuation. He grasped the intricacies of large-scale logistics like few others, yet this build-up felt unprecedented. The Americans weren't merely supplementing an existing invasion force, they were constructing one from the ground up on British soil at a pace that defied conventional limits. Initial arrivals had trickled in late 1943, a handful of destroyers and transports, the vanguard of what would become the Western Naval Task Force under Rear Admiral Alan Kirk. Allied planners had pored over the figures, aligned on commitments, and greenlit the allocations. But numbers on paper were one thing. Seeing them manifest as a relentless stream of steel and machinery was another entirely. As the convoys multiplied, the transformation rippled beyond military circles into everyday British life. Civilians along the southern coast, accustomed to quiet harbours where they knew every boat and skipper by name, now faced a landscape utterly altered. In places like Weymouth and Falmouth, locals stood on sea walls, staring at the forest of masts that blotted out the horizon. A fisherman from Weymouth, barred from his usual waters by security restrictions, later told a reporter he'd counted over 300 American ships before giving up. "I've been on these waters for 40 years, he said. "Never seen the like. The sea's just gone nothing but ships as far as the eye can see." This wasn't mere spectacle, it stirred a mix of emotions among the British public. After 5 years of rationing, blackouts, and Luftwaffe raids, the arrival of well-supplied American forces brought relief and gratitude, but also an undercurrent of envy. GIs, paid 5 times what British Tommies earned, flaunted nylons, chocolate, and chewing gum luxuries that charmed local girls and irked home front soldiers who'd borne the war's brunt since 1939. Overpaid, oversexed, and over here went the wry British quip, capturing the blend of hospitality extended and quiet resentment harboured. For the admirals and planners, the early months revealed a deeper revelation. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, the Allied naval commander for Operation Neptune, had set up headquarters at Southwick House near Portsmouth. A master of complex operations, fresh from masterminding Dunkirk, Ramsay had spent months syncing with American counterparts like Kirk. The blueprint called for nearly 7,000 vessels in total, with the U.S. supplying around 3,000. These weren't abstract projections. By February, the influx had turned harbours into vast parking lots, ships anchored bow to stern in rows stretching miles offshore. British portmasters fired off urgent dispatches about overcrowding, while engineers marvelled at American ingenuity in adapting or outright building facilities to handle the surge. This initial phase set the tone for what was unfolding, a demonstration of American industrial prowess that not only met but exceeded Allied needs, reshaping the war's trajectory. As the build-up intensified, it became clear that the U.S. commitment was transforming theoretical plans into tangible reality, one convoy at a time. By late 1943, the first American vessels had started docking in British ports, marking the early stages of what would become a monumental build-up for Operation Overlord. These initial arrivals, mostly destroyers and a few troop transports, served as the advanced guard for Rear Admiral Alan Kirk's Western Naval Task Force. British planners, including Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay, had already factored these commitments into their strategies, drawing from detailed reports and joint meetings with U.S. counterparts. Ramsay, stationed at Southwick House near Portsmouth, brought unparalleled expertise to the table. Not only had he masterminded the 1,940 Dunkirk evacuation, pulling off the rescue of over 338,000 troops under relentless enemy fire, but he also played a pivotal role in advocating for the cross-channel invasion itself, pushing Allied leaders to commit despite the risks. His experience in coordinating multinational fleets made him the ideal overseer for Operation Neptune, the naval arm of Overlord. As winter gave way to spring, the trickle of ships escalated into a torrent. By February 1944, convoys were arriving weekly, if not daily, flooding southern England's harbours with specialised amphibious craft. The LSTs, landing ships tank, each capable of hauling 20 Sherman tanks or 33 trucks, proved essential for beach assaults, their flat bottoms allowing them to run aground, unload directly onto sand, and retract for reloads. Following closely were LCI's landing craft, infantry, large, designed to ferry up to 200 troops straight to the shore, and smaller LCTs, landing craft, tank, for vehicle transport. Ramsay, binoculars in hand from the deck of his headquarters ship HMS Largs, often tallied these arrivals personally. One March convoy alone brought 22 LSTs and 34 LCIs, with manifests promising dozens more in the days ahead. The sheer volume strained British infrastructure to its breaking point. Ports like Plymouth and Falmouth, already bustling from years of wartime traffic, reported ships anchored in dense formations extending 3 miles into open water. Harbour masters described scenes where vessels were packed so tightly that one could theoretically walk across their decks from shore to sea. To cope, American Seabees construction battalions stepped in with prefabricated solutions shipped from across the Atlantic. In April, they assembled floating piers at Portland using modular concrete and steel sections engineered for rapid deployment. These weren't makeshift fixes. They were full-scale port extensions, complete with cranes and storage yards, allowing for faster unloading and turnaround. British engineers, watching the assembly, noted the industrial precision. What took US teams days might have consumed British resources for weeks, given material shortages and ongoing repairs to bomb-damaged facilities. This surge highlighted stark differences in production capabilities. While Britain had been on a total war footing since 1939 enduring rationing, conscription, and Luftwaffe bombings, its shipyards prioritized fleet maintenance and battle repairs over new builds. American industry, ramping up since Pearl Harbor, adopted assembly line methods inspired by automotive pioneers like Henry Ford. Prefabricated hull sections were welded together at unprecedented speeds, with some yards launching a Liberty ship every 4 days from a single slipway. Let's break down the stark differences in amphibious vessel production between the United States and Britain during World War II. For landing ships, tank, or LSTs, the U.S. produced over 1,000 in total from 1942 to 1945, while Britain and Canada together managed about 80 over the same period. Moving to landing craft, infantry, or LCIs, and their large variants, the U.S. built hundreds in 1943 alone as part of a total run of around 923, whereas British production stayed under 100 for the entire war from 1939 to 1945. Finally, for Liberty ships, those vital cargo transports, the U.S. turned out 2,710 in total between 1941 and 1945, hitting a peak rate of about 3 ships per day compared to Britain's roughly 500 equivalent merchant vessels across the whole conflict. These figures really highlight how American industrial output dwarfed the British efforts, especially when you consider the U.S. ramped up in just a few years. These figures, drawn from wartime logs, underscore how U.S. yards outpaced their allies by orders of magnitude, producing more specialized landing craft in 1 year than Britain managed across the conflict. Ramsay's team, reviewing convoy schedules, had to constantly recalibrate anchorage plans, integrating these vessels into a cohesive force. The coordination extended to transatlantic convoys, where U.S. built escorts protected the very ships they were delivering, ensuring minimal losses to U-boats despite the perilous Atlantic crossing. As the buildup progressed into April, the logistical puzzles grew more complex. British ports underwent emergency expansions, new quaysides dredged, rail links reinforced to handle the influx of not just ships, but the mountains of supplies they carried, fuel depots, ammunition crates, and vehicle parks that sprawled across coastal fields. Yet even these efforts paled against American self-sufficiency. Their forces arrived with redundancy baked in, from extra tankers for refueling to mobile repair shops, reflecting a mindset forged in abundance rather than austerity. For Ramsay and his staff, this phase wasn't just about managing space. It was a crash course in scaling operations to match an ally whose industrial engine seemed inexhaustible. As May 1944 unfolded, the build-up reached its fever pitch, with British commanders conducting final inspections and conferences to lock in the invasion's choreography. Admiral Sir Philip Vian, overseeing the Eastern Task Force responsible for the British and Canadian beaches Gold, Juno, and Sword, toured the American anchorages to assess the capabilities his allies were bringing to the table. At Plymouth, he boarded the USS Nevada, a battleship that had been sunk at Pearl Harbor, salvaged, modernized, and redeployed across 2 oceans to bolster the Normandy assault. Her massive 14-inch guns could hurl 1,400-pound shells over 20 miles inland, providing devastating fire support. The American liaison outlined the lineup. She's one of 3 battleships in our mix. Texas and Arkansas are over at Portland. Add in 3 heavy cruisers, 7 light cruisers, and 34 destroyers for the Western Task Force. Vian ran the numbers in his head. The U.S. was committing more heavy naval gunfire to their 2 beaches, Utah and Omaha, than the Royal Navy could muster for its 3 sectors combined. And that didn't even account for the American ships earmarked to assist the British zones. The types of vessels amplified the awe. By late May, the Americans had delivered over 2,000 landing craft, from the ocean-crossing LST 2 seconds each packing 60 troops and 9 tanks or 150 tons of cargo to the nimble LCVPs, the Higgins boats dangling from davits on larger transports, ready to shuttle 36 men or a jeep straight to the sand. British officers like Captain John Hughes Hallett, a veteran of earlier amphibious ops, recalled the chronic shortages that had hampered landings at Sicily and Salerno. Now, gazing from a hill over Weymouth Bay at more than 400 ships in the harbour and hundreds more anchored to the horizon, he turned to a colleague. "We'd beg for landing craft in every meeting. The Americans, they just kept churning them out." His counterpart, scarred by the disastrous Dieppe raid in 1942 where scant craft doomed 5,000 men, could only nod. For Overlord, the plan aimed for 156,000 troops on day 1, no compromises, no shortfalls. Overcrowding had become a crisis by this point. On June 3, just days before launch, a convoy of 47 American LSTs steamed into Plymouth Sound, only to find every berth and anchorage jammed. The exhausted harbour master, after 36 straight hours on duty, ordered them into a bow to stern line stretching nearly 2 miles offshore, forming an impromptu floating bridge of steel. Similar scenes played out across the Solent and beyond, with vessels so densely packed that their hulls brushed in the swell. British troops embarking for their transports often trudged past endless rows of American ships, drawing cheers, cigarettes, and banter from the Yanks lining the rails. A sergeant, glancing back at the sea of grey, muttered to his corporal, "The Yanks brought the whole damn Navy." The reply, "They always do, Sarge, they always do." This spectacle didn't escape higher echelons. Prime Minister Winston Churchill, who had championed the Allied cause through Britain's darkest hours, viewed the American surge with guarded relief and renewed confidence. After years of urging US time, entry into the war, and fretting over delays in the cross-channel attack, the tangible proof of American commitment, thousands of ships materializing in British waters, bolstered his faith in the operation's viability. In private correspondence and meetings, he acknowledged how this influx shifted the balance, though his innate caution tempered outright enthusiasm, mindful of the risks ahead. The final planning conference on May 28 at Southwick House brought it all into focus. Over 100 officers, British, American, Canadian, and Free French packed the room as Ramsay unveiled the master map, pins marking task forces, bombardment zones, and minesweeper paths. Gentlemen, the tally: 6,939 vessels, total 1,213 warships, 4,126 landing craft, 736 support ships, 864 merchants, he announced. The American share? Roughly 3,000, including most of our LSTs and a hefty chunk of fire support. Silence fell. These men knew fleets inside out, but the numbers evoked comparisons to history's epics. Admiral Sir Harold Burrow quipped, "The last fleet this size defended against the Armada, not launched one." Ramsay agreed, "This dwarfs anything before it, made feasible only by American output." What struck deepest was the operational edge. U.S. forces arrived not just in quantity but primed for action, their ships fresh from yards equipped with the latest repairs and redundancies. This readiness reflected broader efficiencies. While British fleets battled wear from 5 years of global commitments, American vessels boasted higher availability rates, ensuring the Armada could deploy at peak strength. As the fleet turned the English Channel into a steel highway of organized convoys, British leaders grasped the profound shift from scraping by to overwhelming dominance, courtesy of an ally's industrial might. On the 4th of June 1944, with the Armada poised and troops already boarding in many sectors, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower made the tough call to delay the invasion by 24 hours due to stormy weather brewing in the Channel. This postponement tested the limits of an already overstretched system. 6,939 vessels, many crammed with soldiers, vehicles, and gear, now had to hold position for an extra day. British port commanders, juggling fuel deliveries, food rations, water supplies, and ammo distributions across dozens of scattered anchorages, faced a nightmare of coordination, yet the Americans had planned for such contingencies. Their logistics, vessels, tankers, supply ships, and tenders were strategically placed. Manifests stocked with surpluses that turned potential chaos into managed delay. As one British supply officer noted, they operate on abundance, we on careful rationing. They calculate needs and double them just in case. The weather window cracked open slightly on June 5, and Eisenhower gave the green light. Okay, let's go. Operation Overlord was underway. The fleet stirred into motion, a meticulously rehearsed symphony of steel across 5 assault forces. From western ports like Plymouth, Falmouth, and Dartmouth, Admiral Kirk's Western Task Force led the charge, LSTs laden with tanks and equipment forming long columns toward Utah and Omaha beaches. Transports followed, ferrying the infantry who would spearhead the assault, while heavy hitters like Nevada, Texas, and Arkansas took up bombardment stations with their destroyer escorts. To the east, from Portsmouth, Southampton, and New Haven, Admiral Vian's Eastern Task Force set sail for Gold, Juno, and Sword, integrating Canadian and Free French elements. Minesweepers cleared the path first, carving 10 safe lanes through German minefields under cover of darkness. The channel transformed into a disciplined grid of convoys, each lane timed to precise speeds and intervals to avoid collisions in the swell. Admiral Ramsay, monitoring from HMS Largs, watched the exodus with a mix of tension and admiration. After 18 months of wrangling plans, reconciling demands from Eisenhower and Montgomery, and weaving in forces from multiple nations, the reality unfolded flawlessly. "It's working," his chief of staff murmured. Ramsay's reply captured the essence. "The Americans enabled it. We couldn't have assembled this on our own timeline or scale." Dawn broke on June 6 with the thunder of naval guns at 0550 hours, a barrage so intense it echoed back to England's southern shores 40 miles away. The American fire support ships unleashed hell on German defenses. Nevada's 14-inch salvos pulverizing bunkers 12 miles inland. Texas and Arkansas methodically dismantling strongpoints with aerial spotters guiding each shot. British commanders in their sectors appreciated the precision and power, especially since U.S. vessels augmented the Royal Navy's efforts, cruisers and destroyers loaned to Gold, Juno, and Sword to bolster the Allied curtain of fire. The landing craft hit the beaches at H-hour 0630 in waves that seemed endless. At Utah, the U.S. 4th Infantry Division met light resistance, allowing troops to pour ashore and secure footholds rapidly. Omaha proved bloodier, with German machine guns and artillery exacting a heavy toll, but the sheer volume of American reinforcements offshore turned the tide. Follow-up waves, sustained supplies, and relentless naval pounding wearing down the defenders. Across the 50-mile front, British and Canadian forces at their beaches fought their own fierce engagements, marked by valor and loss, yet buoyed by American contributions. Landing craft ferrying their men, U.S. gunfire suppressing enemy positions that might otherwise have stalled the advance. By day's end, 156,000 Allied troops had gained a toehold in Normandy, not without horrific costs, but a foothold nonetheless. The operation's success hinged on the naval backbone, with American vessels proving indispensable. In the ensuing weeks, the fleet shifted to sustainment mode, shuttling reinforcements and materiel in a ceaseless relay. Initial buildup post D-Day lagged behind optimistic projections due to lingering storms and German counterattacks, but U.S. redundancies, extra fuel reserves, pre-stocked depots, and repair capabilities kept the pipeline flowing. By late June, over 850,000 troops, 148,000 vehicles, and 570,000 tons of supplies had crossed, overwhelming the Wehrmacht's ability to respond. Ramsay's post-war report on Neptune was blunt in its assessment. The invasion's viability rested on ample landing craft and support ships, with the U.S. providing the bulk, around 3,000 vessels that scaled the assault to victory levels. This phase didn't just execute the plan, it validated the months of buildup, showcasing how American industrial foresight turned a high-stakes gamble into a turning point of the war. In the aftermath of D-Day, as the Allied foothold in Normandy expanded into a full-scale liberation of Western Europe, British officers took stock of the American naval contribution with a clarity sharpened by hindsight. The fleet that had clogged southern England's harbours in the spring of 1944 wasn't just a collection of hulls and hardware, it embodied a seismic shift in how wars could be waged. For 5 grueling years, Britain had fought a war of attrition, husbanding every resource amid blockades, bombings, and global commitments that stretched its empire thin. Rationing became a way of life. Shipyards focused on patching battle-scarred vessels rather than innovating anew, and operations were calibrated to what was available, not what was ideal. The American approach, by contrast, flipped the script. Calculate the minimum required, then flood the theatre with double or triple that amount, ensuring dominance through sheer volume and redundancy. This philosophy of abundance, born from an untouched homeland and factories humming at peak capacity, didn't just support the invasion, it redefined it. Admiral Ramsay's understated words in his official Neptune report captured the essence. The operation's triumph depended on sufficient landing craft and naval vessels, with the US delivering the majority that made the assault's scale achievable. In private letters and post-war memoirs, British commanders were more candid. One captain reflected, "We knew the Yanks had the factories and the manpower, but seeing it play out, thousands of ships, all fresh built in a couple years, sailing across the ocean to park in our backyards, that's when you got what American power really meant." Another, pondering the build-up, put it starkly, "We'd been scraping by since '39, they showed up and manufactured victory." The public's perspective evolved similarly, from the initial mix of welcome and wariness during the build-up to a deeper appreciation post-war. British civilians, who had watched their familiar coastlines vanish under a sea of American grey, later recognized the influx as a lifeline. The overpaid, oversexed, and overheard jest lingered in folklore, but it masked a profound gratitude. Those same GIs and their gear helped end the blackout drills and ration books. In the years following V-Day, as Reconstruction unfolded, many Brits reflected on the disparity, how a nation across the Atlantic, entering the fray late, could mobilize so swiftly and decisively. It fostered a transatlantic bond, but also a quiet acknowledgement of shifted global dynamics, with U.S. industrial might emerging as the war's unsung hero. How could one country ramp up production so fast, turning assembly lines from cars to warships overnight? The answer lay in innovation, prefab methods, round-the-clock shifts, and a workforce untapped by direct combat. For British leaders, the gap between planning documents and the horizon-filling armada drove home a lesson. Intellectual grasp of scale paled against experiencing it. They'd requested an invasion fleet. America delivered an unstoppable force that dwarfed historical precedents, making Overlord not just possible, but inevitable. In the end, those packed harbors symbolized more than logistics. They heralded a new era where overwhelming material superiority, applied relentlessly, would seal the Axis's fate and reshape the post-war world.